Embarrassingly, this can happen with bosses too.
He is acting as if getting bosses stuck has not been a cheese tactic since Flame Lurker.
I've played a lot of Dark Souls 1 and 3.
For a group of intellectual gamers that act like experts on Souls games, they really do seem to only have a superficial understanding of those games. So many issues they portray as being worse in DS2 are actually the same or even more common in the other Souls games. Also, I am pretty sure that this one got patched out as I spent like 20 minutes trying to reproduce it but wasn't able to. And even if she would get stuck, she can jump to the side or dive down, so she has more protection against it as many other stuckable bosses in the series.
Why spend time meticulously leveling for particular stats when I could just respec at any time and change my entire build on the go?
Is he really trying to convince us that being able to reset stats is objectively bad? Especially when DS1 had res as a troll stat that seems useful, but actually every point you put into it is basically wasted? Also, pay attention to how much leveling costs in DS1. The price increase per level is much lower in DS2 than in the other games. Going from level 114 to 115 costs roughly the same as DS1 charged for going from 54 to 55.
But there is a double whammy of nonsense in Dark Souls 2, and that is the overabundance of souls and thus levels. As long as you play relatively carefully and bank the souls of what you kill while moving slowly and carefully through the game, you will be pushed to cap out all of the stats you actually needed and then sort of splurge on extra stuff.
Context matters. The hard caps in DS2 are much higher than in the other games. In DS2 you were getting 1 point of stamina for every point in endurance, all the way up to level 99. In DS1 there is barely any reason to go above 40, unless you need the equip load for Havel's set. In DS2 you get the 10th spell slot at 75 attunement, and casting speed increases all the way up to level 99. In DS1 there is no reason to go above 50 ATN. In DS2 damage scaling increases all the way up to level 99, and you need higher strength and dexterity than in the other games if you want a power stance. It looks like he just assumed that DS2 has the same hard caps as the other games without even trying to look up what the actual hard caps in this game are. In DS1 there is again a hard cap on scaling damage increase.
Bloodborne makes you highly responsible for your choices, and which stat you pursue will likely be the only one you manage to max out during your first playthrough, while in Dark Souls 2 you can usually hit the hard caps of 3 stats without focusing farming of any kind.
Context matters. Bloodborne has way less stats that you need to level up. And is he really arguing that the RPG aspects that feel slapped onto Bloodborne are better than the RPG aspects in DS2 that are much more fleshed out and give you more build variety? Imagine complaining that you get more levels and that you can reset them. He really accuses things of being bad that the community overwhelmingly considers to be fun. But of course he doesn't rate games on subjective feelings such as fun, but on his objective feelings that anything in DS2 is bad by default, even if it is a clear improvement to the other games. Even if he does not like being given the choice to reset stats, he could just choose not to reset them. I don't see how more freedom and flexibility is a bad thing.
I find it more funny when they can be alerted by the damage other enemies are taking, but you are too far away, so they struggle to decide whether to do anything about it.
Was this simply the first time he ever used a bow in a Souls game? He really likes to portray things that work the same in every Souls game as issues that are unique to DS2. He could have at least tried to snipe enemies in the other games, but I guess doing a basic amount of research isn't needed for an objective review why DS2 is the worst game. Sometimes enemies don't even react.
And for some weird reason, one enemy being aggroed doesn't alert others to your presence. In fact, they can get in each other's way.
A store straight sword, they pretty much just one-shot her.
Look at this.
And
The one in DS2 at least managed to move the enemies out of the way. This one here in DS1 is just stuck completely.
I've played a lot of Dark Souls 1 and 3.
I'm really starting to question that claim. If he actually played a lot of DS1 and 3, he could have told MauLer that most of the things he complains about are the exact same in every Souls game. Using a bow to thin out groups of enemies has always worked, but somehow MauLer presents it as an inherent flaw if you can do the same in DS2. As usual, the enemy only aggroes if I enter his aggro range. These don't even know what to do. They just drop their aggro a few seconds after getting shot, which I don't want to use as an argument against DS3 as I can reproduce it in the other Souls games as well. I'm in the line of sight of his buddy, and not even far away, and yet he still does not react. This bridge is always a good source of pathfinding issues. That was too scary for the dog. The one with the lantern just forgot what he was doing. If this happened in DS2, he would complain about the hitbox. Not even enemies with ranged attacks realize that they should help their friend by attacking me.
Next up we have the increase in stagger time on the headshots, which is just a weird and frustrating change. But on top of that, the enemies in this game seem hell-bent on hitting you in between the eyes.
Seems like it's set up for a sec. Whoa!
I'm not denying that the stagger time got increased, as it really seems to be like 50% longer. But I don't see how they are hell-bent on hitting your head. They aim at your chest, and getting hit in the head happens during specific scenarios. I will show those scenarios soon, but first here are 3 fun clips of enemies jumping down. Walking towards them if they are above you can get you hit in the head. And you can also get hit in the head if you are doing an attack where you duck. In DS2, there are also helmets that prevent headshots.
Wow. Frame perfect stagger.
This was not a headshot stagger. He is running around without armor and a slow weapon, and willingly decided to just get attacked by those extremely telegraphed spells by being greedy. This is just yet another moment where he blames the game for his own skill issues.
Enemies might randomly decide to shoot directly into the sky for lack of a better target.
This also happens in DS1 if enemies lose their focus while preparing to shoot. I couldn't reproduce it in DS3, but I noticed something else.
Like, the crows in Huntsman's Cops. What in the f*** is this 5-year-old's f***ing attempt?
Who even zooms into the background while playing? I always liked how beautiful this Skybox looks. And if I would apply the same amount of nitpicking to the other games, I could also complain that half the birds in DS3 fly backwards and that they phase through buildings. Or we can just accept that we do not need to waste valuable computing resources on background decoration. Skyboxes had some jank in DS1 as well. The point is that if you just want to complain, you can always look for artificial reasons to do so.
Lack of understanding of damage or danger, but we know these creatures don't want to die. Hell, some of them have shields and wince upon being hit.
Is he now really acting as if luring enemies down cliffs or into fire is somehow an issue if it happens in DS2, even though it works in every Souls game? Before I move on, here is some more board jank that MauLer would complain about if it happened in DS2. Here are a few cheese tactics that I used on my first playthrough. The Black Knights on the way to Gwyn were also always fun to cheese. And let us not forget about all the fun you can have in Sense Fortress. They live here, shouldn't they know better? I always wondered if him running away is just a pathing issue or an intended way to trick us into going down to the Titanite demons.
I've played a lot of Dark Souls 1 and 3.
I really fail to see how AI suicide is worse in DS2.
And the Pharos lockstones that open up about as many trapdoors as they do real ones.
Did he not even try to understand the rat-themed PvP dungeons?
The insolent fools line up to trample upon our burrows. I know thy kind, base plotters and schemers all. Put these contraptions to thy employ against thy foe.
If you are in the Rat King Covenant, the enemies here are on your side. While wearing the Covenant ring and being in one of the 2 rat-themed PvP areas, you can pull players that enter these areas into your world as invaders. You can upgrade your PvP dungeon to make it harder for the people you pull in. It is a really great feature, but MauLer still manages to present it as a negative just because he did not even pay any attention what this area is actually about.
There is the total bonfire teleportation from the get-go, which is bloody disappointing in that it likely tied itself to the world being linear once again, though less so in Dark Souls 3.
English is not my first language, so I might have gotten that wrong. But did he really claim that DS2 was more linear than the other Souls games? So in DS1 you have to defeat the gargoyles and ring the first bell. Then you have to defeat Quelag and ring the second bell, although you could do that in any order you like. There are a few optional enemies on the way, like Capra Demon, but generally there are a lot of bosses you have to defeat. Then you need to go through Sen's Fortress. Afterwards you have to defeat ONS. And then you have to fight the 4 old ones in any order. It is a bit non-linear, but really not all that much compared to DS2. Before I continue comparing the linearity in Souls games, let us take a look at how the lack of teleportation can play out in the worst case. Imagine you accidentally went all the way down Ash Lake early and had to walk back out again. It can easily take 15 minutes before you are back at Firelink Shrine. Not having teleport is really not that great for players that do not have the time to always run across half the map to visit certain merchants or blacksmiths either. It was a fun gimmick to show off the interconnectivity that is present in the first quarter of the game, but it is really annoying on repeat playthroughs. In my opinion, it heavily lowers the replay value of DS1. I will keep it short for DS3, as everyone that has ever played it knows that it is a pretty linear route of progression. You start in the High Wall of Lothric, then go through the Undead Settlement, down the Road of Sacrifices and into Farron Keep. From there you go down the Catacombs and then Irithyll Valley, and so on. It's always the same main areas in the same order. There are some optional areas you can visit, like Smoldering Lake or the Cathedral of the Deep. There are a few optional bosses you can fight, like the curse-rotted Greatwood. You can fight the Dancer early to gain earlier access to the castle, but it is still undeniably the most linear Souls game. In DS2 you have to obtain the 4 Old Souls, which typically begins with Lost Sinner, but you can do them in any order you like. You can reach Lost Bastille either through the Forest of Fallen Giants or No Man's Wharf. But you can also skip all the bosses in the early game by gathering enough souls to open the Shrine of Winter Gate. Afterwards there are a few bosses in a linear order, but generally I would argue that it is the least linear Souls game. Especially as you have so much choice in which order you tackle the bosses and as the vast majority of them are optional. You have 10 potential first bosses and only 8 out of the 42 bosses are mandatory. In subsequent playthroughs or new game plus you can try different routes and this gives it a lot more replay value. So I seriously hope that I misunderstood MauLer, as I don't understand how he could unironically argue that DS2 is the most linear Souls game. I also do not understand how teleporting would tie itself to the world being linear, as teleporting encourages non-linear exploration.